We'll call this meeting to order. We'll begin the meeting with a moment of silence for keeping in mind the victims of the University of Virginia shooting in the Charlottesville community. If you all join me in that moment of silence. Thank you. And tonight we have a very big audience, one of the largest I've probably seen in a while. And we have Pat 73, Troop 4061, and 61. And they'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, but prior to that, they're going to recite the Scout Oath and Law. So the floor is yours.
Scouts, attention. Please join me in the Scout Oath. On my honor,
I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country and to obey Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight.
please join me in the Scout Law.
Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent.
Audience, please rise. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we thank you all did a wonderful job. Thank you for being here this evening. You all are free to go whenever you want to or stay. I know a couple of y'all working on bad.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, stand if you're there. Take it out. Take stand. Hey. The mayor's in That was his question. When we
Okay, we'll move on to public comment. We have one person signed for public comment, Mr. Venus Justice. And just wait for your 3 minutes to begin.
They have a computer problem, something's wrong.
No worries. And just when the time begins.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, your name and your
Hi,
address.
I'm Dennis Justice. I live off Ridge Creek Road. I just want to give continued feedback over the direction of the pickleball courts and the courts that you're looking to build at Gilmore Community Park. Again, I want to thank this council. I was at the Henry County Board of Education meeting about an hour and a half ago, speaking about trying to improve public access, to increase the public access of facilities that we currently own, primarily the tennis courts and the tracks. A couple weeks ago, Janet Cohn, who's the athletic director at UNC Asheville, announced a $1.5 million grant from their TDA for a new track at UNC Asheville. She publicly stated that that track would be available for students and for the public at large. They opened up the courts of tennis and the athletic fields and the tracks more in Buncombe County than they do here. That's a theme I'm going with the Harris County Commission and with this Board of Education to try to increase it. They do it with pickleball to some extent. I saw an article in the Asheville Citizen Times. As you know, there's a huge feud between the pickleball community and the tennis community over the court usage. There were some in the pickleball community that was trying to poach perfectly good courts that have an acrylic surface like the courts we will have that. I want to make sure that you understand that under no circumstances do I support taking our one tennis court away from pickleball. I also do not want the Asheville pickleball community, which is at least 2,000, according to their registration numbers. I want them running roughshod over our own courts. I think we need to have, you can have some tournaments or camps and whatnot. I just don't want them to come and just hoard these 4 courts because they're the closest and not for use by the Fletcher taxpayers. We do need an honest assessment of how much all the courts are being used. I went to the pickleball tournament. Again, these are just suggestions, and we're still a few months away before we actually break ground and actually get this done. These are just suggestions. I went to the pickleball tournament at Asheville Rocket Club, and the one thing I noticed at the converted courts they had, there was a 16-foot walkway. And that made it much more accessible to access the two different pods they have. And because there is a space where you might expand for pickleball or something else, and a futsal might be an option. I still think you should look at a 16-foot walkway, and so I'm asking you to talk to your consultants for your PRO. The people looking at building it is how much available space is there. Is there enough to add a 16-foot walkway down the road to consider? But I'm looking forward to these courts, and I'm trying to get the county to fix the tennis courts. Henderson County Jackson Park courts tennis courts are probably going to be rebuilt next year. I hope they are. But again, I do want to thank you for doing this for the town of Fletcher. Thank you.
We thank you. Does anybody else that would like to speak during public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions to the minutes presented? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Our motion and a second, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Move on to item number 2, updates from council, if there are any. No updates from council. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Any questions, comments, concerns related to that item? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Moving on to item number 4, the consideration of American Rescue Plan allocation for less restrictive administrative requirements. Mr. Manager.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. As I mentioned last week, you have a memo in your packet kind of describing the process and I guess some of the benefits, but more so the process, if you would consider utilizing our ARP allocation towards salary and benefits. And again, I'll give the background on this. So the School of Government, again, had provided a method for those local governments that are getting the allocation under 10 million that could be used towards really any public purpose that local governments are allowed to do. And they are recommending as a flexibility tool because by appropriating the monies for this purpose, it frees it up for other projects that you would be contemplating or considering, and as well as other local governments have been doing. And so, with that, I put in your packet the original ordinance that appropriated the monies, received it, and then some steps that would be involved if you were to apply it towards salary and benefits. So we can go back to March of 2021 to do that. It would use up the just over $2.6 million allocation. The next step after we would do that, and this is the condition, so that the monies could be used for the projects that you'd be considering, is we do a fund balance designation at the end of the current fiscal year. And you can do that and do the fund balance designation for capital projects, which is what you've been considering doing with ARP allocation. But the major benefit is it allows you to do that and comply with all things that we're required to do by state law, but you don't have to do all the federal requirements, and which allows you to more economically use the money or stretch the dollar, and just provides a lot more flexibility. If you approve that to do the salaries and benefits for the initial ARP allocation,
Are we in the right spot?
Are y'all here for the HOA meeting?
Huh?
Are y'all here for the HOA meeting?
Council meeting, HOA's on the 3rd floor.
Oh, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, sorry.
It's a popular place.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry, Mark.
So if you approve the monies and salary and benefits, there'll still be some federal hoops we have to jump through. There's some policies that have to be passed, and if you approve that, we'll do those. And then we'll kind of complete that process. There'll be some potential auditing requirements down the road. But it's a much simpler process to utilize the funds and free it up for other projects with fewer strings attached that allows you to stretch the dollar further. So you've got the materials in your packet, and unless there's any questions, the staff recommendations to consider approving it for that use.
Well, I'm certainly in support of this item. Questions from council?
What federal policies have to pass? You said there'll still be some federal policies that have
Yes.
to pass, there's some hoops to go through.
Right. So we'll have to, there's a records retention policy that we'll have to approve. And we already have a records retention policy, so it would basically be concurring with the federal requirement for it. An eligible use, that it's, you're confirming it's an eligible use for the funds. Allowable cost policy, civil rights compliance, and then a conflict of interest policy. And they were detailed out a little bit further in the packet last month, and I've got a copy of that. It was a blog post from the UNC School of Government. But those are, and it's nothing particularly onerous with doing that.
It's things that are already in place, is what you're saying.
But yeah, they're mostly in place, and with the ones that aren't, we just agree to abide by that, and it largely mirrors things that we're doing already.
Any other questions or comments?
So with this, real quick, I like the bullet points. It's a little bit better than last time, I'd say.
Okay. Sure.
As long as we put it out there to our citizens, the transparency
Right.
of what we're doing with the money and how the money is going to be allocated, like going in 2.6 going into general funds, as you're saying, and then we will remove 2.6 out of the general funds and earmark it, and it needs to be really clear that we're earmarking for capital projects, if that makes sense. So transparency is a huge. I see you done a little bit better than last week or last month. I think that's where I had a little issue from it last month. Another question is, I know we made a motion last month that died. Can you turn around and make a motion on the same thing the next month? Okay. I was just curious.
Do we have any other questions?
I'd just like to say I agree with Trevor. I think the money should be assigned for the future capital projects, but I think we should do it with the intent that these are not your run-of-the-mill capital projects. These should be projects that are improvements to the town over and above what we're currently doing right now.
Agreed.
And just it's okay. Just another kind of dovetail on what Bob was saying. They're really trying to push to make these transformational type projects.
Right.
So it's an opportunity to get some things done that's on a much larger scale than would otherwise be able to do.
Anything more from council on that item? Okay, do we have a motion to authorize staff to create a policy and project ordinance for ARPA funds to be spent for salaries and benefits?
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 5. Consideration of legislative priorities list for the fiscal year 2022 and 2023. We have an updated list.
Yes.
From last week.
Yes.
You wanna go over that, Mark?
Yeah, I just, in follow-up to the discussion last week, I had a recommended, I guess, revised list, if you will, of the legislative priorities. Then y'all had some feedback on it that I incorporated into what would be a final version that you've got in front of you. So you've got a copy of what the revised list would look like with all the edits taken out, or edits incorporated rather, and then attached to it is the basically the edits you made from the prior week. So I bolded some additional language there under number 6, and then the strikeout on 7, 9, 10, 12, and 13. And unless you'd like me to go through all of them, I can hit on those or.
No, I think we're okay. Yeah, are we all okay? All right, do we have a motion to accept the legislative priorities list for fiscal year 2022, 2023 as presented?
I make a motion to accept.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Moving on to item number 6, status of discussions with the NCDOT on improvements required for town center. Mr. Manager.
Okay, last week I talked to you about the kind of course of action that we're taking since our developer of record had terminated their purchase and sale agreement with the town. And this was due to difficulties with DOT in trying to determine what would be the final list of mitigation improvements and trying to whittle that down from what initially they were looking at or dealing with. We've agreed to, move forward with completing the traffic impact analysis that was largely done, but our developer in the town were kind of taken aback by kind of the impact, or I guess how broad it was in nature, what was originally in there. So we met with DOT on October the 31st, and the good news is several of the mitigation improvements that we felt kind of went above and beyond based on the impact of the project on traffic. They indicated they'd be willing to remove, and again, those were mitigation improvements to Wood Hill in 25, and King Creek Road in 25, and then East Fanning Bridge and Old King Creek Road. And then from there, the developer is going to be the traffic consultant, Matter and Craig, will rerun their modeling, and it will focus primarily between Fanning Bridge and 25 and Howard Gap and 25. They'll go through their process, come back with some recommendations for mitigation improvement, see if that's acceptable to DOT, and then we look to get kind of a price or kind of quantify the costs, potential costs on it, and then look to bring the developer back into the picture, which they've indicated interest in doing that once we're able to determine kind of a reasonable list of traffic improvements out there. So that's kind of, that's where we're at. I did touch base with the traffic consultant about a week and a half ago. He's still running basically doing their analysis, and there's other information he's got to get from DOT. I'll touch base again with him probably tomorrow and see if we have more of an update, because we really need to keep this moving so we can keep our developer partner engaged on this and hopefully get to a reasonable list of mitigation improvements.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that urgency.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? Is that all?
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, I was just going to open it up if there's any comments or questions.
Questions?
You have?
Comment?
Question I have is, and it's not directly related to this, but that other development that is broken ground now,
Yeah. Yes.
Is that gonna have an exit on Hendersonville Road, or is it just gonna be the one exit on Fanning Bridge Road?
My understanding is just Fanning Bridge.
Boy, that's gonna be a mess.
Well,
Yeah.
it is gonna be more activity going in and out of there. They've tried, and they may still be in the process of trying to acquire additional, they were trying to get basically working on the block of
Yeah.
properties, kind of down almost to Skyline Prosthetics. And they've run into difficulties with doing that because they wanted to have access from 25 in Fanning Bridge, but right now it's just Fanning Bridge.
Okay.
Now, if they do the right turn lane and some of these other things, like you've heard in the original mitigation improvements from our project.
Right.
I mean, that helps in there, because then you get less of that stacking of traffic back on Fanning Bridge Road. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from Mark? Seeing none, we'll move on to your comments, Mr. Manager.
okay. I just had a few things. I know last week I'd mentioned, so the new Fletcher Library partners, so the advocacy group, for trying to get a new library facility built here, is going through the process of dissolution or dissolving their 501c3 status as a nonprofit. And it's, largely due to not being able to, and I'm going based on theirs, this isn't just comment from the town or from the town manager, but their frustration with being able to get a good partnership established with the county. They do recognize that the town's been willing to put money up for this, part of the ARP allocation we've discussed, and you councils indicated willingness to do that, and other local funds to help with the infrastructure improvements to build it, but they just kind of hit a wall, and they're quite frustrated, don't feel like it's making any meaningful progress right now, and they'll still be behind advocating for it, but not to the level of organization through the nonprofit. And then working on the monies that they have raised to be going back in for a community benefit. The Community Foundation will be helping with that. Unless there's any questions on that. The next thing I wanted to mention was about our survey that we're going to be doing with FOCO. So it's a national citizen survey, and then it will also include some customized questions. I've got a copy of a proposed timeline that is on the dais for you. Heather and I had an onboarding meeting with staff from FOCO last Thursday, I believe it was, and it'll probably need to be pushed out a little bit further than ending in March, because I got to have some time to come back with you with suggestions on the customized questions. And if you look at the timeline closely, it has it November 17th, which is this week. So that'll be pushed back in December, because I'd like to, by the early December with that meeting, make sure you're all comfortable with this, what that is. I know there was some questions about having an opportunity for open-ended responses. Those are tough to compile in doing this, but what they suggested is once we do the initial survey, there is a way on the online platform that will be available to us for a year where we can put other survey questions to the people who have signed up to the online portal, where you could pose that more open-ended question and get some feedback as far as suggestions narrative-wise that someone might want to share with you. So that was their recommendation. There is an additional cost if you want to have it in the initial survey that goes out. It's just they kind of recommended against it in there just because you get so many comments that it's hard to compile it and
categorize them. and stuff,
Right,
yeah.
and kind of categorize that so that it's in a, I guess, well-organized way to report it back to you to look, especially if you get a lot of comments, which I don't anticipate you get a lot of narrative comments about it, but you just never know. So that's underway, and I can email you the kind of other steps in the process. But next thing is I'll be working on kind of that list of our individualized questions. So the next thing I wanted to mention, so we went through our process with trying to explore sewer extension. This is with ARP monies to the neighborhood, Westfeld Road, North Hudson Lane, and Dogwood Terrace. You sent a letter out in September, done a lot of follow-up, and thank Christine for helping us to organize that and manage the responses. But we didn't hit that kind of 50% threshold or anywhere very close to it. We did additional outreach. She was getting phone numbers, calling, trying to ask neighbors to talk to someone who might not have responded. And so based on your feedback and that the process would kind of end now due to lack of sufficient interest from enough people, we sent a letter out last week that's gone out to all the, we can get you a copy of that. Make a note. Oh, you got it in there. Okay, good. Thank you. So that went out to kind of let folks know that at this time the process has ended due to lack of sufficient response. Just want to give you that update, and unless there's any questions about that, I have one other thing here. This is just an FYI. I know it's a lot of activity at the park sometimes, but so this Saturday is the motorcycle toy run. So it gets a lot of riders out there, and uses a lot of space up for a great cause. They do the toy run. It goes to kids, families designated through social services to get these toys to and contributions. So that'll be this Saturday at Billmore Community Park, and they're expecting anywhere from 200 to 300 riders. They'll start getting there between 10 and noon, and then they plan between 1:30 and 2 leaving the park. They'll have the park shelter rented, and then they'll restrict or put the riders at the rear parking lot, the back parking lot, and so that'll kind of be closed off except for the riders. And then like I said, they'll leave. And then they go to downtown Hendersonville, I think, to the old courthouse to deliver the toys. So
What time is it?
They'll start arriving at the park between 10 and noon, and then they leave between 1:30 and 2. And it's kind of, if you're interested to see it, it's kind of neat to see that many riders out there, and that do cute things with toys on the back of the motorcycles.
It's a lot of riders.
A lot of riders. I don't know what the forecast looks like, but
Cold.
it's cold. Yeah, so I was afraid it was, because I think that, last I saw it, it's going to be cold for a while. So that's all I had, Mayor Council.
Oh, go ahead, Bob.
Back to talking about that poll with poll codes.
Yes,
We're going to
yes.
send out stuff. Why don't we put a location on the town's website about additional concerns and comments, and then just ask Polco to add a sentence at the end. If you have any additional concerns or comments, please go to this web location and leave your comments, so that the comments are coming directly to us and they're not messing up what Polco is trying to do.
Right. Okay.
I noticed that it says Polco prints materials, prepares mailings, and sets up survey online. So it's going to be online, but then there's materials that are gonna be sent to every household, is that true?
Yeah, so how it gets deployed is they do a random sampling by addresses, and a postcard goes to that random group. And then within like a week after it, they get a hard copy of the survey. So you get the postcard, and it says what it's about, and it directs you to go to a website to complete the survey, because a lot of
Okay.
people don't want to do it online. And then they follow it up within, I think it's about a week, with a hard copy. And it's basically a reminder and also an opportunity if you want to fill it out by hand, or, fill out the hard copy and mail it back, you can do that. And then after that, there's an open period where we'll put information on our website. I'll do one of those connect calls, a blackboard calling system, and we'll put things on Facebook, or social media. So we'll kind of then do a big blast to let people know that the survey is available, basically, to all our residents. And so that's kind of the second phase or wave of it, to give people an opportunity to participate.
Who picks the random people the first time? I mean, it sounds like there's only going to be a handful of people that's going to get mailed and tell them to go vote. Not vote to go do the survey.
Yeah, they use a random, software that does a random sampling of the POCO does that.
So
and
every
excellent.
household won't get a postcard, or will?
Well, no, it'll be a random sampling will get a postcard. And then,
Strange.
Yeah, because it seems like it's almost you'll leave out some folks that don't check the website and stuff. Then some folks will get actually a mail-in saying, here's the thing. So it's like, we're going to handpick a few people and leave out the rest of the folks. So I don't want nobody to come back, so why don't you select this person for a postcard and you get select for our folks? Does that make sense?
well, yeah, I can understand there might be
See
some
some
response
heartburn.
like that, but it's difficult to try and send it to everybody out there. I'm not saying it's impossible, but they found it works well to do the random sampling.
The only way you can do, I guess, to make sure everybody, I'd say 90% of the folks would be if we did like you did the tax stuff. That would get the larger majority.
Yeah.
I know it puts a longer push out till July. I think when we send tax out, is it July we send tax?
It's end of August, early August.
Early August?
Yeah.
I'm just worried about the rub on somebody, say if you only sent 100 people this and you left out the rest of the other.
It goes to, I can find out the number, but I think it's like 1,000 households. I mean, we only have about 3,200 households, so that's a pretty large sampling that it goes out to. And then, with the Connect call, with the, putting it on our website, with social media presence, we can also do a press release or get some media attention like newspaper. That gets a pretty good blast out there to let people know, hey, this is available to participate in the survey. And that's they try and help you with the media campaign after that, after the initial.
So does a hard copy of the actual survey go to every household? Or just only that 1,000 or?
It goes to the random sample group.
So basically, somebody could fill it out online and fill out a hard copy, and I don't imagine they have anything, do they have any way to be able to decipher that? Like you could have one household answer multiple times?
I
So
think
it kind
they
of
have. I think they
skews
have.
your answers.
Well,
Is there identifier number?
yeah, I think they have a way to, capture if someone's done it from that household. I believe there's a number attached in there too. Now they don't track because it's to be anonymous. so they don't try and, bring names back out to people who completed the survey. But I think that's how they stop that. And, but, I mean, most people aren't gonna wanna 3 or 4 people do the survey in one household. What they do when it goes, they ask, and this is to kind of decide who does it. Let's say there's multiple adults there that might want to. The person with the birthday that's most close to when it's male, that person, if there's, more than one that would be eligible to complete the survey, they do the survey.
It'd be interesting, I'd like to find out some more information on that, because even if you do an online survey, they don't say that I can just keep submitting, I can submit 25 online surveys saying this way. I want the accurate layout of the residents, not a handful of people that submitted a bunch of, that had nothing else to do and submitted 100.
Yeah, I would think it,
Yeah.
paying $19,000,
It's
if you
gotta
could
be a
hit
way.
everybody. And I would think, I could imagine an adult filling out the hard copy and then go online and fill it out too, just to make sure that they got their answers in there, which really messes with your percentages of what you're trying to achieve.
Hey, Mark.
It's
question.
usually harder to get people to respond than multiple
True.
people responding. So, I mean, it's a practical matter, but,
Mark, I'm not.
and I'll ask these questions. I'm trying to just jot some notes right now, especially since, is it recording?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you got it recorded.
Yeah, I finally did.
Okay. So I'm just trying to capture all the thoughts here about that.
Sure.
And I can ask the question on the postcard. I guess this gets into their costs too. I'll find out exactly about how many minimum does that include in the random sampling.
How many households did you say we have?
It's about 3,200. It's over 3,000 since the last census.
You said they do 1,000 of them?
Yeah, it's my understanding is they do
About 6
about, I
bucks
mean,
a household.
they do so many that it, even though it's random, it's a pretty good, or I'd say a very good cross-section of our community.
So I have a related question to what you just said, Mark. I'm not a statistician, I'm not a surveyor, but I know doing random samplings isn't out of the ordinary. I think that's what's commonly done. I don't know, but, so is there, I would assume if you could ask the question, is there any statistical benefit to random surveying? Because I have to guess there probably is,
There
but
is.
I don't know.
There is, and I don't know the official answer on it,
Yeah.
because I don't do this all the time. I mean, they've been doing this for years
Yeah.
across the country, and so they
It's always just been my understanding that there's a benefit to random sampling. I'm just not a statistician, so I can't tell you what that benefit is.
Question I have is, we're gonna send out postcards to 1,000 people, and then we're gonna do the telephone call and various other advertisements. The people that respond that aren't in that 1,000, are their responses still used in the analysis? Or is POCO only gonna look at those 1,000 responses?
No, they'll use their responses too, in addition to the random ones. No, that gets
Okay.
included as well.
How much would it cost not to do random? I'm just throwing it out there.
I don't know off the top of my head. I can find out. What I was gonna suggest, based on some of the questions you have, is could we get included, within our original proposal cost, try and make some attempt to send it out to everybody, that we have listed. And it won't be exactly 100% accurate, but it'll be pretty close.
Well, if you're having trouble getting people to do surveys, and I know that to be a fact, it would be better to make sure that everybody gets that so that you have an opportunity to have a higher percentage of participation instead of send out maybe 1,000. And, you know, there might be some people that need that hard copy because they're not online, but
Or don't go on websites with the elderly.
I think basically we'd all like a little bit better explanation of why they're limiting it to representative households instead of everybody.
exactly. You're only talking 3,200 households and at a cost at almost $20,000. That's like we're around $6 a household to do the survey, and not everybody's gonna see it, or I guess everybody would have that opportunity online, so that probably helps that, but
And if it doesn't do it by residents, another thing online to ask Mark is if you post it on social media and to make sure that it's actually focusing on our actual residents versus somebody that lives in Flat Rock, saying this is what you need to do. I like to have more tennis courts, you know, yes, you know, that type of thing, so I can come out there and play. I know I'm not a taxpayer or anything, but I just got to filter that out. And if they try to go, also, it's always been a challenge, if they try to go off of the post office, you know, the Fletcher, Buncombe County, and Fairview's.
Yeah, no, we've been very specific with them, and they did ask that on the onboarding call. You know, do you have a zip code that goes, you know, outside your town limits? And we're like, oh, yes, it does.
That's right. Yeah,
So-
absolutely.
So we've sent them, it's a GIS file to show our boundaries, and then they'll have to pull from within that postal addresses within our geographic area.
And if there's something that they have on their survey that indicates their street address or something that can kick it out, because you're gonna have people respond in other communities sometimes.
We may get some.
That might help.
But the vast majority will be Fletcher residents,
Well, of
based on the way
course.
based on the way they have this set up. I doubt you would have any serious skewing of the results based on outside responders. But I'll ask these questions. I mean, they're good questions. I mean, it's not that much more. I seem like I recall 1,000, but I'll verify that it was a fairly large number. I remember one of our initial calls with them getting information that's included in this random sampling. And so, let's see how much harder that is, or what it entails, if there's any other cost, or.
Well,
But
I'm sure
there's a
there'll be
reason-
another additional cost, if nothing else. The postage is going to be substantial, going from 1,000 to 3,200.
Yeah. So my guess is, yeah, they'll want to charge more, but if it's worth it to us to do that, then we'll do it. But there's a reason for the random sampling. There's some statistical and just experience in doing surveys to do it that way. But I can get more of the experience and official answers on that. That was all I had.
Any more from council?
Good questions.
Okay, do we have a motion to enter closed session for industrial and personnel matters?
So moved?
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
A second, any discussion? All those in favor of entering closed session, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? We are in closed session.